Hi, and welcome to our webcast for November 30, 2000.
December. Oh, sorry, I forgot to change it.
Oh, December 30, no.
December 7th.
December 7th. I think we just lost
My
a
bad.
week. Lost a week. Okay.
My bad. December 7th.
Okay. I was just reading, sorry.
Yeah.
My name is Christian Debré, and this is true, okay, that 10 years old. And this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hi.
And also joining us, Taylor Hyatt, our outreach coordinator and policy analyst.
Hi.
Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of right practices that discriminates people with disabilities. Okay, today's topics. First one, 3 Belgian doctors are prosecuted 8 years after questionable euthanasia. And the second one is the UK Supreme Court rejects Noel Conway's appeal. So Amy will help us through those subjects.
And it just goes to show that no matter how many times you proofread something, you miss something important.
That's life.
Yeah, that's life. Okay. So today we are discussing another euthanasia-related prosecution, this time in Belgium. You'll remember on November 16th, that was actually November 16th, the real November 16th.
Yes.
We talked about the first prosecution under the Netherlands euthanasia law. For this report, we examined many articles and in 3 languages, which had incomplete and contradictory information. We've put together the clearest account possible. So we had a lot of material that we were drawing from, and it was dealing with information from 2010 to 2018. So there was a lot of stuff. Tried to get the clearest story we could. And I have to say, I did not do a great job this week. Amy was not on the ball. Okay, so in April of 2010, 38-year-old Tine Nice was euthanized with the approval of 2 physicians and a psychiatrist. Though Belgium's...
So 3 doctors.
Yeah, 3 doctors.
A physician is a doctor.
Yeah, a psychiatrist is also an MD, medical degree. So though Belgium's Euthanasia Evaluation Committee found no problems with the approval process or administration of death, Nice's sister filed a criminal complaint claiming that there were a number of irregularities in the euthanasia process. And NAC magazine reported on November 22nd that the Board of Indictment ruled Thursday that there are sufficient indications that the conditions and procedures imposed by the euthanasia law have not been complied with.
Okay, so it means that the court had do some kind of inquiry and found that there is enough evidence that...
well, not so much the court, but the prosecutor's office.
Okay, it find that there is enough proof to sue those doctors.
To bring a case against the doctors.
Yes. So it's at least it is serious, very serious.
Right, yeah. So if the charges are upheld, the doctors could face life sentences, which is a long time.
Criminal law.
Yep. So these are crimes we're talking about. 2 of the doctors associated with the Nice case may be familiar to those who follow our webcast. Dr. Wim de Stelmans, the head of the Federal Control and Evaluation Committee, which...
Oh, there was no problem with the evaluation. Okay.
Right, so he's the head of the committee that evaluates euthanasia cases. Right. And he is a frequent euthanasia provider. Conflict of interest much.
You think? Are you sure?
You think?
1 + 1 always doing
three.
not three, two.
Yeah. Stated that he was surprised to be considered in a criminal matter since he only consulted on the case. We talked about last week about what it means to be the sign-off person and that it doesn't mean anything. And this is what he's saying. Oh, it doesn't mean anything. I just consulted.
Okay, but at least it's a professional advice.
Right, exactly.
Which mean quite a lot of things at the same time.
Right, I only signed my name. So he was surprised to be under suspicion because he only consulted in the case. As we reported in 2014, this is in addition to all that, Wim de Stelsman led a trip to Auschwitz as an inspirational venue for reflecting on end-of-life issues so that we can consider and clarify confusion. So this is
that was a very bad thing that he had done.
Right.
Time.
He's supposed to be a palliative care doctor. And he's supposed to be neutral on the question of euthanasia, but he's considering Auschwitz a death camp as an inspiring venue.
Yeah.
We talked about this 4 years ago.
A reasonable way to go.
Right. The text and the video of the webcast are available online. You can look at it yourself. We talked about this 4 years ago, but that's a pretty heinous kind of behavior for a person who's supposed to be neutral.
Yeah.
But, so much for the decision by the Euthanasia Evaluation Commission that there was no problem.
There is some people who are more neutral than others.
Yeah. Okay, also, Dr. Yev Thinpont, the psychiatrist in the case, is also known for promoting euthanasia for psychiatric reasons.
Oh, he's a promoter.
She. Yeah.
She's a promoter, not just a doctor who do things time to time. No.
Right. She provides euthanasia and she promotes the idea of euthanasia for people with psychiatric disabilities.
Not exactly the same thing.
In 2015, she published a paper where she described approving 48 of 100, that's almost 50%, requests for euthanasia for psychiatric reasons, whereas other psychiatrists' approval rates ranged from 10 to 30%. So she was twice as high as the other.
Yeah, at the average practitioner. So it's a lot. It's not 32 or 33, just be upset. No,
nearly
it's
50%.
Double.
So, okay. So the complaint filed by Tyne's sisters claims that Nice, I guess, was deemed eligible even though the doctors never prepared a report together or exchanged diagnoses.
Oops.
So, the doctors just say, don't worry, we know what we're doing. We will talk to each other. There'll be lots of consultations. Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah, don't worry, be happy.
Yeah.
No. They doesn't even see by themselves the people, not even a few minutes for some of them.
Right. Nor did they provide any treatment for her autism. And that was the issue that she came in.
Okay.
The complaint also alleges that the euthanasia was performed in an unprofessional manner. So let's get into the details of
what they mean unprofessional.
Right, we'll get into that. Tyne Nice applied for euthanasia in late 2009, but was found ineligible by her longtime psychiatrist.
Which know her pretty well.
Right, and this, again, was another situation where we were getting different information from different articles. Some articles said it was her general practitioner. Some articles said it was her psychiatrist. So there was a lot of confusion.
But anyway,
this doctor she was initially denied by somebody who knew her well.
Yeah.
She then consulted Dr. Thinpont, who received a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome after 2 or 3 sessions.
Oops. A bit short for a diagnosis.
Yeah, and you're barely beyond the "hi, my name is" phase when after 2 sessions, and psychological testing also takes a lot of time. So I can't imagine that they got into much detail. So,
and this psychologist had plenty of time to look at her because she's not in the way to die. Okay? She's just a healthy young people, except for that one.
Right.
Is not.
She wasn't near death. She wasn't declining physically at all.
Okay.
So she had those 2 or 3 sessions in February of 2010. No treatment was offered to help her cope with the diagnosis of or symptoms of Asperger's syndrome.
Even if the diagnosis is wrong, it doesn't even offer to take some kind of cure, whatever it is. And there is existing. They are existing.
Right. Well, also, they didn't, she got a substantial diagnosis. They didn't help her deal with the diagnosis or offer her any treatment. So Ms. Nee's sisters told a Dutch television program in 2016 that they believed her desire to die was related to a recent breakup of a long-term relationship that caused old emotional issues to return.
So normally after some kind of grief, things going back to normal, but they doesn't care about it.
Right. Her sister Sophie reported that the doctor who performed the euthanasia was nonchalant and unprepared, arriving without an IV pole or tape to secure the IV needle.
Oops. That's a very, very, very unprofessional.
Since we're there for one purpose, you would think that they would bring the things you need for that one purpose, but no. Family members had to hold the injection line in place, and the IV bag was balanced on the back of the chair where Tyne Nyes was seated. And her parents were asked to confirm Tyne's death, that her heart had stopped, using a stethoscope. The physician also compared Tyne's death to that of a pet who suffers and receives a syringe.
That's cruel.
Yeah, how dare he? No human can ever become a dog. And how traumatizing must that have been for her family? Were Tina's parents distressed and doubting that the injection would kill her?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, putting them in the position where they had to verify that she was dead, that is absolutely unprofessional. And, balancing the IV bag on the back of the chair and it fell down on her face. That's horrible.
Yeah, it is.
Great. Okay. So during the investigation, Sophie, Tyne's sister, obtained access to her sister's medical file and found emails between Tyne's doctors attempting to block the investigation. Quote, "We must try to stop these people," unquote. Dr. Thenepoint wrote, calling the Nyes family, quote, "seriously dysfunctional, wounded, and traumatized with very little empathy and respect for others."
This is another crime. They tried to stop an inquiry. This is not, it's something that in any country, it's not permitted, whatever it is.
Right. Well, the other what kind of therapist is calling the family dysfunctional in a letter that's, going to other people? That's sort of a breach of confidentiality.
And of course they're going to be traumatized. They just witnessed their daughter and sister dying.
Right. And, even if the family is dysfunctional, which it may or may not be, people don't call each other names. That's like for 9-year-olds in the schoolyard, and grown-up therapists are not supposed to call people names and make fun of them. It's just not done. Yeah, I had a psychiatrist do that to me once. It was pretty awful. Some articles have implied that the Asperger's diagnosis was faked, either by Tyne or her doctors, in order to assure her eligibility for euthanasia. Sam Crane, legal director and director of public policy at the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, says, "It's not uncommon for women especially to be struggling with mental health concerns for many years before finally getting an autism diagnosis. We can we can be diagnosed with depression, anxiety disorder, or other conditions before someone finally realizes we're autistic.
So many years and 3-4 meetings.
Yeah, 3 sessions, that's it. You're autistic.
Yep.
And you know, the other thing about that happens to women a lot is any malady they have, any physical or psychological or mental issue that they have going on, it's automatically going to be assumed that it's an emotional issue, because women, they're just so emotional, you know.
Yeah.
They're on the rag.
It's hysteria. Nothing has changed since the 1800s.
Right. And hysteria, by the way, comes from
Yeah.
the term for the uterus. So by you know, it's all out of our uteruses. Okay, so reports emphasize that this is the first time criminal charges are being pursued in a euthanasia case. However, advocates such as Penny Lewis and researchers such as Scott Kim and Jose Pereira have expressed concerns that the effectiveness of safeguards in euthanasia for people with psychiatric disabilities. And in the text, if you subscribe, you will have links to articles that those people wrote about the issue. Okay, this story raises a lot of questions, obviously. First, Ms. Nice was killed 8 years ago. Why weren't charges brought sooner? What happened between the evaluation commission's ruling that there was no problem and the decision to prosecute? What changed? We don't know. We just don't have that information. And why now? The prosecution was announced only days after the one in the Netherlands. Is Belgium trying to keep up with the Joneses by following the lead of others in an attempt to prove that authorities aren't indifferent to violations of the law?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Right. I think that's another very appropriate thing to look at. Also, is Belgium really trying to get tough on doctors who cut corners on compliance? Or is there another reason to bring charges now? In his commentary in the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition blog, Alex Schadenberg suggests another possibility, that the prosecution of the Nice case may be less about punishing non-compliance and more about establishing standards under which euthanasia for psychiatric conditions is deemed acceptable.
Okay, it's maybe a way for the government to not look at it and they say to the court, do it you.
Right. Basically they're saying, well, you know, we're gonna determine that in this case it was acceptable, and so this is the kind of case where it's acceptable. It's sort of like what happened in the AB case in Canada, where the judge dealt with the question of what's reasonably foreseeable death and basically determined that somebody with osteoarthritis who did not have a prognosis of death, her death was nevertheless reasonably foreseeable. And
so mine is reasonably foreseeable too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the third question is, what is the message we are sending to autistic people when autism is deemed an acceptable reason to want to die? Sam Crane says, the suffering that's associated with unaddressed autism is certainly not incurable. Lots of autistic people who were very depressed before their diagnosis end up feeling much better once they get an understanding of how their brain works, know what they need to thrive, and find a community. Sending the message that autistic people must face lifelong suffering because you can't cure autism is incredibly damaging.
Yeah, and you know,
chronic illness.
Chronic illness, even if it's not curable, there is still some care to do.
Treatment,
many treatment, and I suffering from chronic illness, and I live with it fairly Well,
Yeah. And she goes on to say that sort of attitude has resulted in murders of autistic children and is most likely a contributing factor to our alarmingly high suicide rate.
Yeah.
And she pointed us in the direction of one study of newly diagnosed autistic people that showed that 66% had considered suicide compared to 17% of the neurotypical population. That was attributed to employment problems and social isolation.
Yeah, like old people and others.
Yeah. And that some of the reports say that was Tina's situation. She hadn't, for lack of a better word, had her label for very long. So maybe she's had a sense of not fitting in for most of her life. Now she has to deal with this label being pinned on her and reworking her identity and how she looks at herself on top of it. That's stressful. And then on top of that, you have a lack of connection between the medical profession and the newly diagnosed person. Oh, congratulations, here's your diagnosis. You're on your own from here.
Right. Well, more than that, it's congratulations, here's your diagnosis. Now we're going to kill you because your diagnosis merits euthanasia. And, that it is it's very devaluing when somebody says to you, your life based on your condition is not worth living. And that's what they're saying. That's the answer to that. Ms. Tyne's story, or Ms. Nye's story rather, is a prime example of how euthanasia supporters dismiss inadequate safeguards. Problems are ignored until they can no longer be hidden. The view that death is a solution to quote unquote suffering shows an ignorance of and a bias against disability in the medical profession. And we've talked about that before. If you want more information, look up Carol Gill. And doctors' willingness to wrongly attribute any distress that person faces to their condition.
So, suffering psychopath.
Yes, suffering psychopath. Okay. Our next item, UK Supreme Court rejects Noel Conway's appeal. And Noel Conway is a guy who has ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or I think it's actually a similar but not exactly the same thing, but he has a motor neuron degenerative disease. So his appeal to the United Kingdom Supreme Court has been rejected. Mr. Conway has been campaigning to overturn the ban on assisted suicide contained in the Suicide Act of 1961.
So 60 years ago, a little bit more.
Right, claiming that this law violates his right to privacy under the European Convention on Human Rights. Isn't England trying to exit from the European Union? So how would that apply? But anyway, the Supreme Court said Conway's case was unlikely to succeed given Parliament's 2015 vote to maintain the assisted suicide.
Oh, not the same. 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Not the same thing. It's new.
Right, exactly. So in 1961, England passed a law that said that suicide is not illegal, but, assisted suicide is illegal.
Yeah.
And
it's a murder.
Right, it's a murder. And now, so he wants to challenge that law, but in 2015, the British Parliament said, no, this is not something we want to change.
So the Parliament relook at this law and say the law is outdated.
Yeah, that the law is what we want.
Yeah.
And Not Dead Yet UK takes a lot of, should get a lot of credit for that. The High Court, one step below the Supreme Court, declined to hear his case in June. Mr. Conway originally brought suit before the High Court in October of 2017 after the court refused to remove the prohibition on assisted suicide. And he brought a number of questions to the courts in different cases at different times, and I could not find a chronology of the different cases he brought and questions, so it was a little confusing because there was something that happened in March of 2017, and it was just confusing. So unfortunately, we didn't have all of the details, but we did put articles, references in the text, so you can go to the articles themselves. Is there anything you wanted to add, Taylor?
Nope, I think we've just about covered it.
Okay, right. All right, then if you want more information about the subjects that we talk about here, you can visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujours vivant, not dead yet. You can visit our website at tvndy.ca. You can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Christiane, to Taylor for helping out. Thanks to you for being there. We will see you next time.
Bye. Take care.